Hello, in this video, I'm trying to demonstrate how HPE Synergy Virtual Connect Tunnel Mode can work with ACI in one special use case. The use case for ACI is the ACI is kind of doing the inter-vlan bridging. What I mean by inter-vlan bridging is you have multiple EPGs on the one BD, and they are sharing the same IP subnet for these EPGs. Pretty much for user encapsulation perspective, facing the server side, facing VM side, they will be using different VLANs, but the ACI BD will be doing the flat IP subnet routing for all the entire bridge domain. So the traffic might be coming from the one VLAN coming into EPG1, coming to the ACI, and the ACI might change the encapsulation VLAN tag and send it out to the EPG2 with a different VLAN. So in this scenario, there will be the problem with the Virtual Connect tunnel mode because Virtual Connect tunnel mode really don't look into any .1Q user VLAN ID. It's just doing some internal Q and Q encapsulation and just trying to carry the traffic back and forth without looking at the user VLAN. Uh, so some customers kind of confused to see, okay, how we can solve the problem. This is the purpose of the video. Again, this is only when the ACI is kind of doing this inter VLAN bridging scenario where one BD has multiple EPGs inside it, and the BD has a one flat IP subnet. For other, scenario like ACI network centric and ACI 1BD with multiple EPGs, but each EPG has their own subnet, you don't have to do this. Okay, so there's pretty much there are a couple of workaround you can use on ACI to solve this problem. That's I'm trying to demonstrate in this video. So here's some topology. Let's browse through some the from the ACI side and from HPE Synergy side and the VMware side. Okay, so I have two. Let's focus on the first EPG, EPG3 and EPG4. Okay, so these two EPGs, if you look at their policy, let's go to the general. So you can see the EPG3 is under bridge domain VMBD2, and it's the same thing as EPG4. Okay. Okay, VMBD2. So if you switch to another screen for just the, you know, for the ACI BD configuration, you can see this BD2 configuration. Okay, so for this scenario, let's get straight down to the point. If we look at the L3 configuration, we only have one flat subnet. Okay, this is the BD MAC address. So pretty much, this is kind of the ACI is doing the inter-VLAN bridging. So you have multiple encapsulation VLANs for each for different for each EPG, but they are sharing the same subnet. So there's some one workaround you need to do. So you need to change first. You need to change the multi-destination flooding from the default BD flooding BD to flooding encapsulation. Okay, so and this is and after you change that, there's another option you need to change is L2 unknown unicast. Okay, you need to change from the default hardware proxy to flood. The moment you do this, the ACI will give you a pop-up window say, in order for me to enable this, I have to enable the R flooding. Okay, so just say yes, and then the ACI GUI will enable for you, and then you can submit the change. The reason we need to do this is in the, let me show you my version. My version is 3.27F. So right now, as this recording, I want to show you the date. This is October 19th, October 9th, 2019. So this is not the latest, but my point is you need the version on the APIC side above 3.11. The reason we need the version above 3.11 is this is the 3.11 ACI release notes. There's one enhancement for this release specific for trying to solve the problem when working with the virtual connect tunnel mode. Okay, you can read that pretty much. EPG, when you have the two EPGs or multiple EPGs, there's an option you can turn on. Okay, so that's so before this version, I think the GUI is still you may see this option over there in the GUI before 3.11, but this option only truly start to work after this version. Okay, so for more details, you can see this layer 2 networking configuration guide. I already have the link open up for you. So this is the configuration guide. Remember the two options you need to enable. The first is in flood encapsulation, and the second option you need to do is you need to set the bridge domain into flood mode because it says the bridge domain spine proxy mode is not supported. So this is according to the Cisco ACI release notes for this version. So that's the reason inside the BD, we need to first enable flood encapsulation, and also we need to change L2 or unknown unicast from default hardware proxy to flood. And this will in turn enable the R flooding. Just to make sure you have option one enabled and option two along with R flooding enabled as a flood. Okay, so our BD is set. So the pretty much for this ACI, I is connecting with my Synergy tunnel mode. This is going to my Synergy. I have four links doing the LACP VPC on both sides. And if you look at on the Synergy side, I have everything is linked as active. I have the LACP activity on each of the link. You can see the port is Ethernet 1/21, 1/22 on two lift switches, which is 93.180 YC EX model. So if you really want to verify on the ACI side, we can do further. I think that's my leaf node number. Fabric, show LDP neighbor, show LDP neighbor. Okay, so this is some links is connected. Okay, that's the link I'm talking about on the Synergy side. And if you do the 104, it's kind of doing the same thing. Okay, these two links. Okay, so the for the VPC side, if you do the show run on the ACS side, the port channel, I think that's my VPC. That's what I'm. So for this VPC, I also say some a VMM domain and my physical domain over here. So the VMM domain really related to this demo is this one, ACI DVS. Okay, just to remember this name. You can also go back to the APIC side for the EPG. If you want to do the go back to EPG3. If you go to domain, you can see that's a ACI and DVS VMM will associate with it. Okay. For the Synergy side, facing remember the uplink, we really don't care how many VLANs come in from ACI. We just define one tunnel network, and we assign the same tunnel network to the server blade using server profile concept. I have two server blades. Pretty much they are configured in identical way. So pretty much you just define patch the same tunnel VNet to VMware side. On the VMware side, if you remember ACI VM and domain name is ACI DVS. So this DVS switch created by ACI AP controller. You can see the 3 and 4. So let's focus on this two. We are doing the dynamic, so ACI just pick a dynamic VLAN from the dynamic pool from their side and provision on the port group side. Since the tunnel mode, we can tunnel all the traffic back and forth. We don't look into the VLAN tag. We just pack the packets between VMware and ACI just to travel back and forth and on the ACI. Okay, through the Synergy. If you look at my N host N VM, you can see my the two VMs I want you to focus on this. It's EPG3 VM1 and EPG4 VM1. So if you go to EPG3 VM1, uh, you can see my IP is 13.11 and EPG4 VM1 is 13.13. So they are under the same subnet defined in ACI bridge domain. Okay, so if you want to ping 192.168.13.13, you should be able to ping. The interesting part will be if you take a look at the ARP table on the end station, you can see for VM1, I got to know the VM2 for the other EPG4 through this MAC address. If you remember, this MAC address is actually the MAC address for the ACI BD. So ACI, by using this flooding encapsulation, ACI is kind of doing the proxy ARP. It's kind of hide the real MAC address from the source VM and the destination VM. So you can see the default gateway which is a ACI BD is using the same MAC address. If you take a look at EPG4, yeah, so you should be able to see the same. Let's do the ping. Okay, IP neighbor. You can see now the ACIBD. So pretty much for two VMs, if you sit on the VMware side, for EPG3 VM1 and the EPG4 VM1, they are under the same subnet. They think the other VM is they using they learned by the ACIBD address, so they will just send it to ACIBD. And the BD on the ACI side, they will do the proxy ARP through this flooding encapsulation. So that's the point. That's how you can solve the problem. Because if you do not use this flood encapsulation, do not enable proxy ARP behind the scene on the ACI, then without the for the tunnel mode, we will have the problem, understand, because sometimes your VM will be coming in, the true source will be coming in from the Synergy downlink. This is on the Synergy side, and it will go to the ACI, and the ACI will, because it's a inter-vlan bridging, it will using the same source address and come into the Synergy uplink, but using the different encapsulation VLAN under the different EPG. That will cause a confusion for Synergy, because Synergy will say, okay, wait a second, for VM or EPG3 VM1, I just learned from downlink, and now you are telling me this same MAC address is coming from uplink. Remember, even though the VLAN is different, but for tunnel mode, we don't care. We don't look into it. That's a confusion on the Synergy tunnel mode, because typically for network upstream device, we do not have this kind of inter-VLAN bridging behavior. But in this case, we do. That's the reason we need ACI to do something to use the proxy ARP to hide the true VM address, MAC address. So we always learned VM1 and VM2 from the downlink, and we always learn the BD MAC address from the uplink, so there's no confusion for the Synergy side. Okay, so to prove that, we'll try to see if we can change the configuration back to the default. Okay, so we'll do so this is BD2, it's a EPG3 and EPG4. So we'll do the hardware proxy. So this should be the default hardware proxy for L2, multi-destination flooding BD, sorry, no ARP flooding. Okay, so we'll just submit. So if you do this, then you will have sporadic traffic forwarding problem for the EPG3 and the EPG. I may even lose some configuration, lose connectivity to the EPG3 or 4. So I'll do the IP neighbor flush. Oh, I think I already lost the EPG4 VM. Okay, so let's do the IP neighbor. So right now let's do 192.168.13.13. So I'm not able to ping. That's the reason is, this kind of the true MAC that's coming back from the ACI side and into the Synergy uplink, causing the confusion. So that's the reason I think I also lost the connectivity to the VM. Yeah, so this is option one. If you have the one BD, you have a multiple EPGs, and this EPGs you want to share the same IP subnet. Okay, so that's the. See, now it's coming back. So the virtual connect will just sometimes shut down, block the traffic from this VM. So you will have this kind of unpredictable behavior for this VM activity. Okay, so let me try to enable it back. So we do the flooding encapsulation, and we also see this is the ACI pop-up window I mentioned. So the R flood has to be set true. So if you say OK, the ACI will set it for you. So option, the uh, uh, option one, you need to enable this. Option two, you also need to enable this, and this will in turn turn on R flooding. So if you say submit, yes, submit changes. Okay, let's go back to my EPG3. So we may need to wait for. Okay, so okay, now let's do the IP neighbor. Let's do 198. Let's try to pin the guy again. 3 IP neighbor flush IP neighbor. Yeah, 192. 168.13.13. I also need to flush this side. IP neighbor flush. So okay, now it's back. We do the IP neighbor again. Okay, now it's so this is the key thing. So let's go back to the IP VM2 IP neighbor ping 192.168.13.11. Okay, so now we proved the enhancement in the ACI 311, the flooding encapsulation, does work with the virtual connect tunnel mode in the inter-vlan bridging case. Remember, this is only for this use case. Okay, so if you have other network centric modes or ACI doing one BD, but each multiple IP subnet, so each IP subnet belongs to one EPGs. You don't have to do this. Okay, so do this. Okay, so I'll stop the ping. This is option one to work around this problem. There's actually another option. So the key thing is to let the ACI to enable this proxy ARP behind the scene. There's no way in a GUI uh, to tell you the proxy ARP is enabled. It's just behind the scene ACI is doing that. Um, but in the CLI, I think in some line card you can see there's a proxy ARP bit is enabled, but I don't want to dive that deep. The other option, the ACI is doing proxy ARP implementation for BD is actually doing the feature called microsegmentation. In this case, we don't really need microsegmentation because there's no need for Synergy to let the ACI to fine-tune the whatever endpoints inside the EPG, parent EPG into child EPG into microsegmentation for the USEC. But if we just enable this feature, then actually behind the scene, even though we don't really define any classification for microsegmentation, this feature will be enabled, will actually solve the problem for this ACI synergy and virtual connect tunnel mode. So if you take a look at this, so last time we focused on the EPG 3 and 4. So if you go back to VMware, so 3 and 4, we are just doing the plain VMM integration, but we need to enable BD for flood mode in order. So assuming these two VMs want to share the same subnet across the different EPGs. Okay, there's another case for micro segmentation. Is the if you take a look at the EPG1 and the EPG2, so you can see they are doing some private VLAN stuff. So that's the behind the scene ACI micro segmentation, the implementation. So on the GUI side, you don't need to define anything. So pretty much in the GUI, if you take a look at this tool, we focus on EPG. So if you take a look at the policy, so let's first make sure the BD side. So in this case, we don't need to touch anything on the BD. So let's see, BD1 is my BD for this EPG, and the EPG2, if you take a look at the policy for the channel, this should be also using BD1 for BD. Okay, so the special thing for these two EPGs, that these two EPGs is enabled for micro segmentation. If you take a look at allow micro segmentation, is over here. It's set as true. Okay, in this case, I just use a static, the primary VLAN and secondary VLAN you define. My primary is 900, my secondary is 901. So if you take a look at uh, so this is also allow micro segmentation, but they have the primary and this secondary VLAN pair. So this is how it's being provisioned on the VMware DBS switch side. So if you take a look private VLAN, so I have this too. So whenever the VM trying to talk with any outside, they have to go up to the ACI side, and the ACI will doing the proxy ARP for these VMs. So that's the reason the centralized ACI security policy can be enforced on the VM level because of this private VLAN model. Okay, so if you go, so as I mentioned, we just need to borrow behind the scene proxy ARP feature for micro segmentation. Typically, if you really want to do the micro segmentation, you come over here, you define a USEC, and you define the domain. Oh, one thing is I think according to Cisco documentation, if you want to do micro-segmentation, you have to make sure everything is immediate. Okay, this is according to the Cisco side. So not the on-demand. So my domain is here. This is my USEC site. Typically, you will define some attribute here. So you can see I actually don't have anything. Because the purpose for us to demo this is I don't really need any micro-segmentation for security policy. I only need this proxy ARP feature. Okay, so which I just need to enable for the parent EPG to allow micro-segmentation. And so if you go under my VM level, so you can see this is EPG and this is the EPG EPG2. Okay, so you can see let me see the VM 10.11. Let me see IP address. So this VM1 in EPG1 is 10.11, and let's take a look at this IP address. And this is 10.13. So this is again, two EPG share the same BD, and they also share the same IP subnet. And if you want to ping 192.168.10.13, okay, it's working. So if you take a look at IP neighbor, again, you can see 10.13. We learned the VM by the ACI BD MAC address. Okay, so the traffic has to be sending out to the VM, to the ACI BD because they are doing the private VLAN model, and the ACI BD will in turn, transmit the traffic across the different EPG, different encapsulation VLANs. So let's do the same thing here. Okay, so this is the same thing here. For everything is visible by ACI BD MAC address. Of course, you can see every VM has their own true VM MAC address. It just be hidden by ACI BD. Okay, so that's pretty much two options. So again, in summary, for use case, if you have ACI app-centric model, and if you have one BD, including multiple EPGs, and the multiple EPGs share the same IP subnet, and when you want to work with Synergy Tunnel mode, there are kind of, three options. We cover two options. The first in this video, the first option is to you enable, let's just consolidate the view here. For 3 and 4, they are under the 1BD. In this model we demoed, you can enable BD at the flood mode. Okay, so to work around this problem. And for the 1, 2, there's another way you can do that. It's just so you enable micro-segmentation to enable private VLAN on the VM side. And behind the scene, in both cases, the ACI BD is doing the ACI side is doing proxy ARP model. That's really the model we want to use when we are doing the Synergy Tunnel mode, when doing the inter-vlan bridging. The third option, of course, is the AVE. So if you want to deploy the Cisco AVE instead of the VMware DVS, because for AVE, very likely you are doing the VXLAN. The VXLAN is pretty much we encapsulate everything using just one single VLAN. So everything will be encapsulated inside the normal UDP packet. So for Synergy, we don't see any this private VLAN stuff. We just see one regular VLAN, and inside it's the UDP packets, UDP payloads. We just switch the traffic back and forth like it's a regular VLAN traffic. So the VLAN termination will be on the AVE VM side and ACI leaf nodes. So that's the kind of the three options. So the BD, you enable flood, to enable proxy ARP, and also the BD EPG you allow micro segmentation, and the third one will be deploy Cisco AVE model. Okay, thank you very much.